with a 3-year lectionary. I am in my 9th cycle as far as taking a look at the text that we have for today. So this is the 9th opportunity I've had to look at this gospel reading, and it makes no more sense today than when I graduated from seminary. And the New Testament scholars that I have read looking at this basically said, we've been looking at this for 9 lectionary cycles, and it doesn't make any more sense today than it did then. This is a very difficult reading. And by difficult, I mean it doesn't lend itself to an obvious understanding of things. We have a basic premise that we see in other parables where we have the owner and a manager, right? I'm going to be a little redundant in my descriptions of these folks, just to add emphasis to this. The manager is not the owner, right? They are managing things that are not theirs, right? We might even use the word steward. Maybe that's a word that we might use. In church circles, when we think of stewardship, we think of stewards, manager, somebody who takes care of something for someone else, right? So that's the basic context that we have here. We have an owner, he's come back, he's heard awful things about his manager. His manager is scared to death because he's got to bust out all of his QuickBook reports, and he's anxious because he knows this isn't going to go well, and he's going to be out of there, and he doesn't know how he's going to feed himself after that. And there's this great line in the text where he says, what am I going to do? I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm too ashamed to beg. What are my options? So his options apparently are to cheat the owner more, to gain favor with those who owe his master money. And the master, after seeing this, says, that was fabulous. I have never seen anybody work this shrewdly. Well done. Feels like kind of an odd take on the text. One of the things when we look at this is that many of the parables that we get, there is, at a quick read, not all of them, but many of them, at a quick read, there is an obvious right and wrong answer. There is an obvious good person, bad person in the story. The person you are called to emulate and the person you are called not to emulate, right? So the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? We get 3 people walking past this poor guy that's beat up on the side of the road, and they don't stop to help. These are the people you don't want to emulate. But the Samaritan does stop. Okay, now we got that one, right? This parable as well causes us to do things that you're not supposed to do with parables either. If a parable is about 3 or 4 verses long, but you need to add a page and a half of text so that you can make sense of the parable, that's not how a parable works. So it's kind of like maybe you're at dinner with friends and you tell a joke and nobody laughs. In the next 30 minutes, you're explaining the joke. It's just, it doesn't work that way. In this text, we even have the sense that the writer is confused about what is being said. Because you'll note in the last third of the text, there are these kind of one-line proverb kind of saying statements at the end of it, where the gospel writer is like, I'm not quite sure what we're doing with this text. There's a couple of things, though, that I think this text is about. One, it's a topic that Jesus talks about periodically in the Gospels, a not uncommon topic, which is money and wealth. And I know you showed up today thinking, I hope Pastor Matt preaches about money today. I really, really, really hope he does. But that is what the purpose of this text is. It's talking about wealth and money. But one of the things about this text that I think we should just live with, it's a sloppy mess, right? There isn't this sense that the guy who's getting fired goes to the master and says, gosh, I really blew it. I hope you could forgive me. I know I have to go now. I'll stay at my beach place and retire there. That's not how it resolves. There is this scramble, this desperation. How am I going to feed myself? What's the next step? And there's something about that that feels a bit truer to life for me. How often do we run into a situation where we think, I wish running into this obstacle that I had two choices, the right one and the wrong one, right? And then I could say, I'll take the right one and I'll do that. Is it just me, or does it feel like that's not often the setup that we get in this life? We either get 34 options, none of which are the ones we would have picked, or we get one option, and maybe that's also one we wouldn't pick, right? I feel like this text speaks to that mess that is life. The sense that we don't have the cards in our hands that we would choose. You're in the middle of that poker game thinking, wow, well, if I could pick my own cards, this would go well, wouldn't it? But that's not what this text has. This text says, with the given set of options that you have, what is the best way to go? And it seems to me, when we talk about wealth and money, that that's often the kind of scenario that we're dealing with. From something as absolutely minor as checking out and being asked, paper or plastic, right? To bigger things. Where is my money invested, and how is that impacting the world beyond me? But I think there's another topic that we've been focusing on around the edges in these last few weeks here as we talk about care of creation. And I think in some ways our response to care of creation is similar as well. Sometimes it's like, I just rode my bike a half a mile to my job site. What impact did that have on Middle East politics this week? It's hard to know, right? This sense of, am I changing the world? Am I doing all kinds of big things? There was a member here a while back, Hilke Wiersma. Some of you remember Hilke. And I remember Hilke, as we were talking about environmental issues and care of creation, he very facetiously said, yeah, I'm afraid to turn on the light anymore. The sense of, what do you do? What do you do? There is this profound sense that we can either be paralyzed, a sense of, I don't know what to do, I'm not going to take any of these options, or I think what more often happens in regards to our finances, our approach to creation, or any number of things, it doesn't really matter what I do. So I'm just gonna, whatever, right? Is riding my bike this stretch gonna shift the trajectory of the universe? We get this sense of just being kind of blasé about everything, because what's it matter? If the guy at the next table isn't gonna put his compost in the green bin, does it matter if I do? If the whole world isn't investing in this sort of way, does it really matter what I do with my investments? All kinds of things where there's this kind of wishy-washy sense. And there is a phrase as we get a little closer to October, as we think of our Reformation time frame, as we get a little closer to Reformation Day and Sunday, often misused, and I'm kind of tweaking it a little bit myself today. But Luther would often talk about these situations where we might be paralyzed or have some sense that it doesn't matter which direction we go, that we might wallow in things or be paralyzed, either of those kinds of things. And he would say, as Christians, we're not free to be in those positions. We're not free to simply wallow. We're not free to be paralyzed by the options that we have before us. We're called to act, recognizing that it might not always be clear that our action was the right way to go. But we are nonetheless called to act, trusting that if we have taken the wrong step, that Christ will forgive us, but that nonetheless we are called to move forward and do our best every day, recognizing that the next set of decisions or actions is yet another set of decisions or actions to figure out how to navigate this life. Luther's phrase for this was sin boldly, the idea that we are called to act, seeking to draw closer to Christ at all times, but recognizing that in the thick of it, sometimes life is as messy as the gospel reading that we have for today. I think one of the things that I want to leave you with is this idea that we are called to act, even when it's not clear to us what that right action is, in a recognition that this text gives us that this life is messy and it's hard. We don't get the cards we want. We have to make decisions based on information that we don't have, and it can be stressful. And I think this text kind of articulates that human messiness in this life and recognize that it's okay to be in that, but we're still called to move forward, to draw nearer to Christ, regardless of what options we might have. Amen. Please stand as you are able.